Welcome to the Rideshare Guy podcast, where you will learn about the rideshare and mobility industry straight from Harry Campbell, who's got over 5 years experience covering the industry and has talked to thousands of drivers. There's no better place to stay up to date, entertained, and educated. So let's dive in.
Matt Newberg is the founder of HNGRY, a subscription media platform exploring the impact of technology on our relationship with food. Each week, he analyzes cutting-edge trends ranging from last-mile grocery delivery to virtual restaurant brands and the future of convenience. Over the past year, HNGRY has built a trusted community of industry insiders from companies like Doordash, Uber, Instacart, and GoPuff through its new Trends subscription service. So he's really the guy to talk to when it comes to food and technology. And Matt, how are you doing?
Doing great. How are you?
I'm doing excellent. And I don't know if I've ever told you this, but I sometimes refer to you to other people as the rideshare guy of food and tech.
Oh my God.
What do you think about that?
I can only hope to have that title. Thank you.
I don't know if that's a
honored.
compliment, but that is
Definitely.
how I like to, maybe it's a self-serving compliment. That's how I like to refer to you. And, welcome back to the podcast, because I had you back in 2019, episode 106. We're almost 100 episodes later, but we talked about virtual kitchens, cloud kitchens in that first episode. Do you remember?
Yeah. And then I think I came back in the middle of the pandemic. We did something like a little follow-up, and now here we are again.
Oh, geez. I forgot that time. Wow. So this is your third time on the podcast, huh?
Yeah, I think so.
All
But
right.
hey,
Well, I don't think
happy to be here.
Yeah, I don't think you have the record yet, but I am really excited to chat to you today because obviously over the past year and a half, the pandemic has meant an explosion in kind of what I feel like everything last mile. What I want to talk to you today, specifically though, starting off in the grocery space. When I say grocery delivery, like who are the big players to you in the grocery delivery space? What's the first few companies that come to mind?
So you have your mass retailers like your Walmarts of the world, and then you have Amazon, which is a pure play, online grocer. I guess omni-channel grocer at this point. We'll get into Amazon Fresh, and then you have marketplaces like Instacart, and then obviously like the larger traditional retailers like the Krogers of the world are selling directly, but they're also selling on those channels.
So, you know what? I'm glad you brought up kind of those other services, because honestly, like I forgot about Albertsons and Ralph's. How funny is that, right? Like I personally order so much through Instacart. That's sort of who I think about when I do grocery delivery. But I mean, I see Albertsons, Ralph's, all these companies, have either experimented with their own versions of grocery delivery or partnered. So when you look at like, if we focus on delivery of groceries, holistically right now, like what does the data you've been seeing look like as far as market share? Is it Instacart all the way, or Amazon? Like who are the big players when it actually comes to like getting groceries delivered?
So yeah, I don't think that the grocers themselves are being counted as larger players in the realms of in the worlds of Amazon and Instacart and Walmart. So it's really those three kind of duking it out at the top. Some second measure data has been showing that Walmart grocery has eclipsed Instacart, but I don't really trust that data because it's all based on sample sizes that are very small, and it's really hard to suss out when you deal with the Targets and the Walmarts of the world, who is actually a grocery customer and who is actually just there to shop for stuff. And I think that kind of speaks to like where we're at in this whole race. It's like we're not just delivering groceries. The pandemic has forced people to go to the center aisles and stock up on, paper towels, toilet paper, and all that stuff, and stock it all in the same kind of order, and make that kind of this basket that is, more unique and more diverse than what it had been probably pre-pandemic, and definitely higher value.
Yeah. So basically what you're referring to is sort of this blending of delivery verticals, right? When we think like Instacart started off as a purely grocery delivery company, right? Now though, I think they've added on. What is Instacart added on? Have they added on? I mean, you can order alcohol through them and other services, but are they kind of primarily grocery delivery still?
No, but yes, but also Best Buy. So that's electronics. in a handful of other verticals, home goods, et cetera, et cetera. We've even seen Instacart starting to get into just essentially aggregating direct to consumer ship to home services like ButcherBox. So that's basically them not even getting into fulfillment and just literally, creating a demand channel for an existing online retailer that sends something to your house in 2 days. So it's frozen meat. So Instacart is really trying to get into all these other verticals outside of food. I think you're going to see more of that. It's just that food, historically was the most underpenetrated vertical. We went from 3%, just below 3% penetration pre-COVID to now, I think around 10%. So that's
grocery delivery
3x in groceries. So it obviously made sense to start there. But I think, as the service matures, you'll see more non-food verticals.
What do you think is the main reason for a company like Instacart expanding into other verticals? Is it because grocery delivery is a low margin, not profitable, tough to be profitable business, or is it because they want to sort of grow their top line revenue, or what's like the main one or two reasons you found like for a company like Instacart to get into all these other verticals, basically?
If you step back and look at the business model, Instacart, I think, is really positioning itself as AdWords for grocery. And this is very evident by the fact that, the new CEO comes from Facebook and was responsible for literally monetizing the newsfeed. And you've seen Facebook's performance lately. It's absolutely
pretty good,
crushing it. So, when you look at that, that all comes down to what a lot of these apps want is frequency and to really hold that retention. So by aggregating more non-food verticals, that enables marketplaces like Instacart and even Uber, which is also getting into this non-food stuff, to own more of those occasions, so that you associate those instant needs, whatever they may be, with that service, and know that they can deliver it within 1 hour, 2 hours, and now in some cases even 30 minutes, which Instacart recently announced its express feature. So to me, it's all about really owning more of those kinds of tasks for customers to really drive loyalty, which ultimately increases the ad dollars that could be extracted from your purchases.
So do you think advertisements are sort of the way that some of these companies kind of potentially get to profitability, or do you think the core business of grocery delivery and convenience delivery and all these can be profitable? And maybe we'll skip convenience. We'll come back to convenience at the end, but
I think they're all related. And I think it's a great question. I think if you look at, I was just talking to someone yesterday from a fund called Coefficient Capital. They mentioned, they said that that Kroger would likely not make whatever its net margins are, something in the range of like 3 to 5%.
Right.
Net margins if they didn't sell ads to their CPG brand.
Interesting.
In the form of slotting fees, which basically allow you to get onto the shelves, and also their digital products. So those grocers really rely on those fees to drive the very little profitability that they do have. And so the real threat now is in digital players coming in like Instacart and in a time where the penetration is growing of online orders and taking those dollars away.
Yeah, no, it's a good point, actually, because I think that sometimes if you're adding a layer onto an existing business, you sort of need to look at the unit economics of that existing business and whether it can sustain, a third party, because obviously that's going to reduce the margins for everyone. And I do think that, I'm not sure, to be honest, just like how well monetizing, ads and things like that on Instacart are going to work. But I mean, I definitely see it, as a user. That's what's kind of cool about a lot of these services. You can use them firsthand. You can actually work for them, kind of like we do, and get even more insight. Because you mentioned the Instacart 30 minutes or less. Like I've been placing orders here in Los Angeles. Don't think I've got a single one in 30 minutes, to be perfectly honest.
Did it
more like No, they don't promise, but it's definitely faster. Normally it's about 2 hours, or they
Yeah.
sort of give you like a 1 to 2 hours. And if I pay the extra $4, it's never come in 30 minutes. I've done 4 or 5 of them so far, but it's definitely, they get someone working on it pretty quickly. So it is faster. But I am seeing, obviously in the Instacart app, a lot more of these featured products, featured listings, coupons, right? So I feel like they've got some interesting opportunities there, that are related or, kind of analogous to like the slotting fees that grocery companies or grocery stores do, in person. So but before I forget, you mentioned Uber. So Uber is doing big things in grocery with Cornershop, right? There's been some news there. They made a partial and then I think ended up, have they fully bought Cornershop now?
Yeah, they paid out the remaining sum. I don't remember what it was, but it sounds like it's like over $1 billion to acquire that company. And they signed one major customer, which is Albertsons, which is the same customer that DoorDash has also signed. So, and then they used that as the kind of the press release to say that they were in all these cities, and they're just the cities that Albertsons currently has all of the stores under all of its different brands.
Gotcha.
And there's tons of different labels. I've been, I've been pretty public about this, but I'm not impressed by Cornershop. They're literally just copied Instacart, but they have literally, a lot less experience and a lot less technology than what Instacart has built to layer itself into this realm of grocery. There's a lot of modules and moving pieces that need to happen to build these kinds of services, and Instacart has a good 9-year head start on all of these companies.
What are some of the tougher modules and things like that? Is it the partnerships with the actual, grocers, or is it there's some sort of back-end API integration that tells you like what inventory levels are at? Like, what do you think are some of the, challenges, I guess also kind of like moats that Instacart has built that's going to make it tough for a Cornershop to compete?
So one thing is the inventory, as you mentioned. A lot of grocers, didn't have those feeds of inventory, real-time inventory. I mean, it's really hard to know at any given moment what's on my shelf and be able to really ascertain that kind of real-time inventory.
I mean, I would even push back. Does Instacart really have that right now, though? Because when I'm ordering, I mean, there's replacements almost every single order, right? So it doesn't seem like they have real-time inventory or honestly anything even close to that. It seems like it's more based off of like AI, hey, they'll notify you and say, hey, you ordered, this brand of yogurt. This item sometimes runs low. Would you like to pick a replacement now just in case, right? Exactly.
Yeah, that's all machine learning driven. That is just the reality of the situation. So that is definitely a part of it. The other part is, all the rider logistics and being able to shop the stores efficiently and be able to pick things in the store effectively and get those orders out quickly. Batching. So if you don't have enough demand, you can't really do the batching. You're just going to be shopping for one customer. It's going to be more expensive. But I think the reasons that
although I'll be honest, I mean, as a shopper, batching 2 orders at the same time is pretty tough.
Right.
I mean, you can kind of actually notice a lot of times on Instacart as a customer, like you might be missing an item or they might give you someone else's bag or, like there are a lot of errors made on the batching side for it. Cause you have 40 items or 25 items, right? And 2 different orders. So.
Yeah. I mean, the ideal way to do it is the way that Amazon does it and the way that actually a lot of these convenience players are now doing it, which is hire full-time pickers in the store. And this is something that I think Albertsons announced it was doing is, basically relying less on other third-party pickers and just using these services for fulfillment.
Yeah, I think that's actually smart because, one of the things we've got a course out right now for delivery and grocery drivers. And one of the things we tell them, especially on Instacart specifically, is you want to start in an area and a store that you're familiar with, right? If you've ever walked into a grocery store that you've never been in before, you're like, where the hell is this item? Where the hell is that item? I mean, it's like a total nightmare, right? And so you can imagine that there's really a huge advantage if you've got your own people who, have shopped 100 or 1,000 times at a single store, and you can really increase the efficiency. I actually remember you and I think we did a clubhouse a few months ago, or maybe it was longer than that, but it was, and one of the things we talked about how Instacart was moving away from that model where they were hiring employees, right, to do the shopping. Do you remember that?
Yeah, we had Steven on. Yeah.
Yeah, we had Steven on. So I mean, it would be interesting if the actual, grocery outlets, sort of did that part and then use the services for fulfillment, right?
Yeah, it's just a matter of finding the labor to do that. They have to employ them full time and provide benefits. So I think in some cases retailers have decided to do that, and so it does help with some of those things, but there's still inventory issues when grocers decide to do it themselves. And maybe they use Instacart software, they just don't use Instacart employees, right?
Yeah. So what about DoorDash? I don't think we've talked about them in the context of grocery delivery. I think they're doing some experiments and have announced some stuff there, right?
Right. So they, just like Uber and Cornershop, have also managed to poach Albertsons
right.
as a customer, and they would handle the kind of the white label fulfillment, the last mile kind of component of the delivery, as well as also on the marketplace side, add them as a grocery kind of category inside their app to kind of round out, in the same way that Instacart is getting into non-food categories, DoorDash is getting into, aggregating non-restaurant, grocery and convenience categories, right? And so today that looks like a single partnership with Albertsons and maybe a few other local grocers here and there. But I'm being very curious to see how they end up incorporating that data and selling it first party as a Dash Mart. I believe that Dash Mart will grow the number of SKUs it currently aggregates from something around 3,000 to.
What's Dash Mart?
Dash Mart is, kind of the GoPuff of DoorDash. So it's basically a vertically integrated first party retailer of household essentials and food, and a lot of non-perishable food.
Gotcha.
But there's a little bit of grocery in there, and I think my bet would be that over time they're going to, they have the kind of the freedom that Instacart doesn't have, where it could actually just, because the marketplace is so fragmented on the supply side, could actually compete against Albertsons and a lot of these guys. So everyone who's signing up for these platforms better be watching out for DoorDash, because they're notorious for entering, using data in ways like Amazon to go and do it themselves and capture more margin. Because I can tell you some of the fee caps that are coming and a lot of the legislation that's coming in cities like New York are not going to make it easier for it to layer on top of other people's businesses.
Gotcha. No, that's a good point. I pulled open the DoorDash app while we're talking here, and right across, I mean, literally the first option that I see on my screen in the upper left is convenience, right? You hit a tab for convenience and it pops up stores like 7-Eleven, Walgreens, Vons. So, I mean, they literally have grocery and convenience right here. CVS, Albertsons, like you mentioned, Smart and Final. So they sort of seem to be blending like that convenience and grocery category. I don't see a Dash Mart, or maybe I wouldn't see it. What would the Dash Mart look like if I was in the DoorDash app?
It would probably be like one of the top ones. There's not
I'm
one
assuming their product would probably be up there.
I think it will say Dash Mart, and it will probably be the lowest fee, and there's not one in LA, which is why you're not seeing it. So now you're pulling it from Albertsons. You're curating probably a smaller section of Albertsons. So at the end of the day, it's just data for them to feed this beast. And I've heard that some of these Dash Marts are doing, upwards of $10 million per store, which is, could be multiples larger than what a typical GoPuff MFC is doing.
Yeah, no, it's interesting that you mentioned data, because it reminds me of this story and interview that I always kind of think about, where, just to kind of highlight the power of some of the data. It was an interview with Jason Droege, who used to run Uber Eats, and I think it was on the Eater podcast. And he was talking about how, they noticed everyone was searching for ramen in areas, that didn't have any good ramen shops, right? And there were this sort of these black holes of people, and they saw that people were launching these, and they went to basically underutilized kitchens, or, people already, restaurateurs already on their platforms that, hey, make some ramen and we'll drive all this business to you. And that's kind of what they did, right? So it is pretty, I think people like to always say like, oh, if we have data, we can make more money and get profitable. But there really are some pretty cool ways to leverage this data if you know what you're doing, right?
Absolutely. And now it's shifting away from leveraging that data and providing it to third parties towards using it internally in a way that Amazon has done with Amazon Basics.
Yeah, no, that's actually the exact strategy that it made me think of as Amazon Basics. Just the other, I keep sharing all these anecdotes. Hopefully people find them interesting. But just the other day, I'm on Amazon buying paper towels and, my normal Bounty paper towels. And I see the Amazon brand. It's cheaper, exact same product, bought it and it works. So might be a business to study. But, so we've talked about convenience a few times. I'm excited to get into convenience because I think there's a lot of action going on here. My last question on grocery delivery specifically, though, is like based off the companies and the models we've talked about, who do you think is in the best position right now? I don't know if it's to win or to sort of, kind of like come out on top of this grocery delivery space.
I'm very bullish on Amazon. Amazon's omni-channel strategy. It looks very nascent right now, but there's the reality is that if you count up all the Whole Foods that are out there and you count up all the former Prime Now locations that have, basically been converted into fresh fulfillment centers, and then you count a couple other warehouses here and there, you get over 600 last mile facilities in the U.S. today. And I recently
that they basically own, right?
They own, and a lot of them are obviously Whole Food stores,
right?
And so they have a lot of last mile infrastructure to get, pretty close delivery times for customers. I don't think people need their groceries immediately. I think, it's actually misleading. Amazon says that they do 2-hour delivery. That means it's a 2-hour window, probably the same day. But they have a lot of capacity and they're growing that capacity exponentially. This year, they're expecting to grow their same day Prime delivery of non-perishable items by 4x, and then next year get it to 10x of what it is today. So that's insane. And that's all the center aisle stuff. It's your, the cans of tuna, it's your ketchup, it's those paper towels you bought the other day. It's all the stuff that grocers like barely make any margin on, that take up a lot of real estate, that they basically locate, 45-mile drive outside of the city center, and they can get it to you in 5 hours. And those things you might be a little less sensitive on the time, as long as you get it the same day. And I think Amazon has taken a very calculated approach, and maybe they were definitely set back by the pandemic on the same day plan, but very bullish on that front on the delivery side. And then the stores, they're going to enable the stores to have insane amount of the brands that advertise in the stores to really hit the customer from every single angle and really drive attribution and data in a way that a lot of these traditional retailers that even have their own media offerings cannot compete against, in my opinion.
Yeah. So I think, the answer that probably most people would have given would be Instacart. Do you think that it's Amazon more because of that vertical integration you're describing? Is that sort of what's going on, or is it more a combination of factors?
Well, no, I'm very bullish on Instacart. And obviously,
well, you got to pick one though. That's why this is a tough question.
I'm picking Amazon. I'm picking Amazon because Instacart kind of loses the customer once they walk into the store. And I believe that we've seen grocery year over year right now. Online groceries down almost 25%. It's about 23%.
Oh, really?
It's down about 23% year over year. Obviously a lot of this could be people traveling, going back to restaurants, but I think people are re-entering stores more and becoming more comfortable shopping in the store. And so I think grocers are looking at customers in a 360 omni-channel view. And when they outsource to Instacart, you obviously kind of lose that kind of 360 loyalty kind of, you ain't entering your loyalty number into Instacart.
Although I imagine you will be pretty soon, to be honest.
I hope that they will start letting brand retailers integrate their loyalty programs, but unsure. So I pick Amazon because of I think it's very clear that Instacart is obviously a $50 billion business today, and it's going to be, a much bigger business in a few more years. But I think that a lot of people have already written off Amazon where they're barely just scratching the surface. And I was in
Yeah.
a store the other day,
Hmm.
and I can tell you all these keywords that you mentioned that you search for, that you get product placements for, like
Mm-hmm.
mac and cheese or cream cheese or just basic essentials. The same advertisers that are advertising online on
Yeah.
Amazon Fresh to all these cities that they're offering it in are also spending money on the shelf space and the digital TV ads inside the store. So it's a
Hmm.
full ad spend. That's a 360 kind of
Yeah.
targeted campaign to get a customer to buy something. They can literally force your hand if they want to. Amazon can
Interesting.
force you to buy a private label Amazon brand or Kraft macaroni and cheese, because that's literally that's the only two options that are promoted on the shelves, inside these
Yeah.
stores. All roads lead to these kinds of these eight national multinational conglomerates that control our entire food system. It's insane.
Yeah. All right. I don't know if that's a good thing or scary, but we'll take a pause on the grocery delivery side because I want to talk about the hot topic of the moment. I think in a lot of respects when it comes to fundraising, new companies, a lot of action, convenience, right? This
Yeah.
category. Let's start. I mean, how do you define convenience delivery or convenience items, and how do you compare that to grocery delivery? Because there's obviously a lot of crossover.
I think convenience is, I think grocery has historically been, planned. I think something like half of all grocery orders are weekly stock ups, and the other half are kind of your kind of express orders, which are below a certain value. I don't know exactly what that
Gotcha.
number is, but it's not it's not $120 weekly
Right.
stock up, but it's maybe half that. And so convenience, you're looking at a fraction of the express order. The express order is something where it's like I'm cooking steaks tonight and I need like baked potatoes, steaks, I need seasoning and blah blah blah,
Yep.
vegetables. And I'm ordering it because I'm going to order it at 3 because I'm going to start cooking at 5 and blah blah blah. So the convenience run is maybe a $15 order, $10 order of something that I just realized I'm missing something, and it can be in the form of a pharmacy item, or it could be household good, or it could be maybe a missing grocery item. But on the food front, I'm probably less sensitive to the actual type of brand that I'm getting,
Yeah.
because it's like something I need kind of right now.
Right.
I don't care if it's like the fanciest ketchup. Just give me whatever private label or crappy Hunt's ketchup. Sorry, Hunt's. I just thought of that because it's like probably the worst ketchup brand. But usually you're less sensitive to the selection, and that's kind of you historically these convenience stores have been attached to fuel, and 93% of Americans live within a 10-minute drive of a fuel convenience store.
Yeah.
And so obviously 7-Eleven kind of pioneered a lot of these non-fuel stores, and now they obviously merged with Speedway. But and then the next iteration of the non-fuel convenience store are newer stores like Foxtrot, which are doing a lot of delivery and in store. And then you have just pure dark stores like
Yeah.
GoPuff, and now all these faster guys.
Yeah. So I feel like even though, GoPuff is one of the bigger names, I feel like they're still, I mean, they just raised $1 billion, I think, at a $15 billion valuations. I still feel like they're somewhat under the radar relatively
Totally.
in the kind of gig economy space. I mean, for a $15 billion company, I feel like in my mind, they're kind of the leader when it comes to convenience delivery. What does the landscape look like for you? How do you look at the convenience delivery landscape? Is it GoPuff? GoPuff? What other companies are you following and tracking?
So, obviously there's Doordash and the third-party marketplace, and it's very analogous to Doordash
Right.
and restaurants, right? Like they aggregate hundreds of thousands of restaurants. They also aggregate lots of the leading convenience stores, whether it's Casey's, Wawa, Sheetz, 7-Eleven, and those retailers also, some of them have their, 7-Eleven has its own app.
Right.
And then DoorDash is competing against those guys with its own Dash Mart, right? And then you have GoPuff. And then, below that, you have a lot of these newer services, some of which have hailed from other, from overseas, like Gorillas, which has like,
Oh, where
over
did
three.
What's the backstory on Gorillas? Where'd they get started? They were
They,
overseas.
they were started in Berlin,
Hmm.
I believe, and then they were founded about a little bit over a year ago, and kind of copied the Getir model,
Mm-hmm.
which is this like kind of 10-minute delivery of 1,500 SKUs. I think Gorilla's index is higher on kind of more perishable, fresh grocery than
Yeah.
some of the Getir stuff.
Hmm.
And then Getir's not in the US quite yet. But Gorillas launched in June in New York, and now I'm here basically covering four different companies, really
Oh,
three
really?
main companies that are doing pretty much the same thing with a little bit of variations here and there, and just wrote about my review of all of them today. So we
So
have
we're gonna get
Gorilla.
the inside preview right here for free.
You
Wow.
get the preview. So Gorillas,
Got to
I
pay for
think
the
that
whole thing though, right?
absolutely. Gorillas is kind of the biggest guy. They don't have the
Mm-hmm.
most micro fulfillment centers, but they will. And then you have Joker, which just announced a Series A of $170 million.
Yep.
And then you have, which is about half of what Gorillas has, and they started in LATAM, and they're also in Poland as well. And then you have one called Fridge No More, which started in Brooklyn, and then you have another really small guy called 1520. And there might be some other services I'm
Yep.
glossing over in other parts of the country, but those are kind of the ones that have been popping up a lot lately as far as being spending
Yeah.
the most money on ads.
Yeah, I know we just had Duffel on
Right.
our Herbivore webinar, which actually, I don't know if it's going to go before or after your interview, but it will be on the podcast. I'm going to be replaying that
Oh, cool.
webinar. So if people want to learn more about that, yeah, so it's cool that there's definitely some smaller ones. If we focus on the big ones for a second, I mean, you've got GoPuff, like you mentioned, Doordash, Joker, and Gorillas are sort of the two new ones that kind of seems like they came out of nowhere. There was a good chart shared on Twitter. I think I messaged you about from Justine Moore at Venture Twins. I mean, Gorillas has raised $295 million in the first year. Joker, $170 million in the first year. And it was funny because kind of comparing them to Instacart, DoorDash, and Postmates, which were actually founded, much longer ago, different fundraising environment, but, 1.8 million, 10.8, 19.7 million. So it sort of kind of highlights like, man, this convenience space is hot. There's a lot of money. And it's interesting too that it's sort of like some of these companies have started international and come to the US too, right? What are your thoughts there?
Well, I think the international cities, it made sense because of the way that that Carlos Marino talks about the 15-minute city. We've talked
Right.
about this with Herbivore, right? It's the idea that everything is kind of accessible, all basic services and retail is accessible within a 15-minute scooter ride or a bike ride or a subway. And so I think that infrastructure is much more advanced in these cities like Berlin and Paris, etc.
Yeah.
And so the market for something like this in the US, a 15-minute or 10-minute delivery, is pretty small if you think about like how many tier one very dense metros there are. And which is why I think GoPuff has really doubled down on the tier two driving kind of cities throughout the heartland of America.
Well, that's interesting because I mean, most gig economy companies, sort of most of their business does come from the tier one high density urban cities, Los Angeles, Chicago, New York City. It's funny. A lot of people always ask me, where my audience of gig workers resides. And I'm like, just go look up, a top 10 cities by population. And that's exactly how, my audience lines up because that's where most of the action is. Are you saying that, because I feel like there's sort of a big bias, if you look at like the total number of trips or orders that are happening, there's a big bias towards these cities. So you're saying that you don't think that can sustain, or it's not as big of a market for those that like 10-15 minute delivery, because it seems like it's still pretty big, right?
I think it's big. I think it's going to be a race to the bottom as far as profitability. I think a lot of the existing services know that you have to be in New York to kind of it's kind of pay to play, but
a lot of competition.
You're not making money.
I mean, there's four convenience companies that you're looking at in New York right now, right?
Yeah. It's the city does not make it easy to operate a business. to sell alcohol, it's incredibly difficult. There's all these workarounds, and I wrote about this. GoPuff is a alcohol centric business. The way it can achieve the gross margins of the typical basket is by attaching, liquor. About half the SKU variety is liquor. If you study what, the app and look at the categories that are in there, about
And they did
half
buy
of
Bevmo, right?
Right, they're buying up all the Bevmos everywhere. They're effectively doing this arbitrage where they're buying Bevmo for, half of its revenues effectively, and then getting a value, and then adding that to their GMV, and then raising money at a 10x multiple of their revenue. So it's an arbitrage. Actually, it's very interesting. So yeah, I think, there's only gonna, this quick delivery is only gonna work in, let's say, I don't even know if it could, Gorillas is coming to LA. They're gonna come to like parts of Santa Monica, somewhere in La Brea, and one other part I can't remember, but you really need that density to get that under sub 10-minute delivery time. And they're not using cars because they really want to pride themselves on this kind of low or no emissions. And then so it works, maybe in certain parts of LA, TBD. Chicago they're doing, Boston they're doing, San Francisco, but then Philly's like a GoPuff town. I just don't know how many other cities are out there. Like, is this going to work in Atlanta? I don't know.
Well, I think one thing that you're highlighting is the competition in this space, right? I mean, at the start of the convenience delivery revolution a year or two ago, right? If you look back at the history, it was kind of GoPuff, right? Even though they were somewhat smaller and under the radar, they kind of dominated the statistics when it comes to market share of convenience. And correct me if I'm wrong, but DoorDash came in pretty quickly and overtook them when it comes to convenience market share. Is that sort of what you've seen, or what do you think there as far as market share?
I roll my eyes at that.
Second measure data that you don't trust.
No, it's not second measure, but they had Edison Trends do a study of receipts. But you're looking at a blended mix of third party and first party. So the proper way to really, I think, gauge that success is to say how much sales are Dash Mart's doing versus the GoPuff business, because that's the apples to apples comparisons. You can't look at DoorDash selling 7-Eleven and say that that's apples to apples. So yes, in aggregate, because they're a software business and because they're a logistics company that aggregates other businesses, sure, they're larger, but
that's a good point.
Customers are going to start demanding more control over these services, over what they're ordering. And the only way to really achieve that, and certain prices, and the only way to really achieve that with all these secular trends around labor and whatnot, are going to be first party.
Got it. So by first party, you mean the vertical integration strategy? Because I mean, I think this is something I've seen some pushback recently from a lot of more traditional investors, right? Like the reason why all of these Instacarts and Ubers and Lyfts have such high valuations and such high multiples is because they don't own anything, right? They don't have supply chains, and they don't have, they don't own warehouses and real estate. And I mean, I guess correct me if I'm wrong, but obviously GoPuff is, sort of fully vertically integrated. Jokers and Gorillas, is that kind of their model too, to do this full vertical integration? So I mean, I guess what do you think about that full vertical integration model, and can it be profitable? And I guess, does the profitability even matter too?
I think these quick commerce players I think GoPuff is profitable in all of its markets. They already came out and said it. I think the gross margins there are really good, and I think the contribution margins are going to be magnitudes larger than DoorDash, something like 10x that. And it's because the basket sizes are significantly higher. I was just pulling some data from Yipit data. The AOVs on GoPuff that we're seeing are around $25 to $30, which are tracking higher than the aggregated purchases on
And a lot
Uber
of that,
Eats.
like you mentioned, I'm assuming is alcohol. The alcohol seems like I mean, anything that kind of increases that average order value, right? The AOV, like alcohol, that's a high
Mhm.
margin. Seems like, a lot of the companies are looking to add stuff like that. Uber added Drizzly, right? Purchase Drizzly for $1
Right.
billion or something like that, right?
Yeah, but the Uber's not really investing into is doing that in an asset light way, because that's a marketplace that sits on top of a liquor
Mm,
store that can't be combined with chips, and it can't be combined with
got it.
pizza, which GoPuff is getting into fresh food. So um, it's all about strategy, how you're going to go about attacking it, and how you're going to go about creating that basket size that works for your unit economics. I can tell you that the current way that Joker, Fridge No More, etc., are waiving these delivery fees is not going to last.
Hmm.
You're ordering one thing, and that driver is only able to do maybe 2 rides per hour, because
Right.
it takes them 15 minutes to get to you, and then another 15 minutes to get back to the micro fulfillment center. They have a tiny little bag on their back.
Yeah.
And so by the time they get back, they got to go get the next one. That thing's also going to be a $5, a $10 order. No, who's paying for that, right? Like
Yeah.
you really need you need to be selling bottles of Patron to
Yeah.
really make that work, right?
You
It's
need
like
small, expensive items, which is why
exactly
I
gold
have always
watches.
said alcohol, marijuana, very,
Mhm.
very, very popular, or should be
Yeah.
very popular. So if you had to pick, if you were designing one of these companies yourself and you had to pick two or three of these attributes to really, sort of be a very successful player in across convenience and grocery and really, everything delivered. I mean, what would be the two or three
Wow.
sort of strategies and or focuses that you would make? I mean, you've talked about things like, high AOV products like alcohol, vertical integration. What are the two or three things you think matter most to the success of these businesses?
So I think that whoever wins is going to have to figure out a retail strategy to build an emotional connection with the customer.
Mm-hmm.
I think that some sort of form of retail is going to be, brick and mortar retail is going to be needed to get the customer to really trust these services. And I think
Got it.
speed is not as important. What's really important is the selection, and like how you curate that selection. I think there's a company called Foxtrot that's doing a really good job curating, higher end, upstart, the cool brands
Yeah.
that you see being written about on all these blogs. And being able to get people to try those products without ordering online and waiting for a
Mm-hmm.
24 pack that doesn't work through the mail. That's going to have to
Right.
work through these kind of last mile services. So I think it's selection, retail, and not going after New York City. Like, do that
Mm-hmm.
last. I think that's why you're going to see GoPuff not go into Manhattan. I'm
Mm-hmm.
already seeing them go into the Bronx. They're going into Long Island. They're going
Mm.
into parts of East New York.
A DoorDash
To
strategy, right?
Exactly. So I think they realize that it's a bloodbath. It's a race to the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yes, they'll get there, but not now.
Yeah, no, that's a good point because I mean, even the final component, right? The last mile component of actually getting these things delivered, right? I mean, some of these companies are looking at using micromobility options,
Yeah.
scooters, e-bikes, and things like that. But I mean, you also have to pay, at least $15 an hour. And right now, with a huge labor shortage, probably even more, right? So it
Yeah.
really, some of these low value items and not charging delivery fees, that might work okay or well at the start, but you do it. I guess the couple things you've said that have really stood out to me is getting that average order value up, increasing the frequency, vertical integration. It seems like a few of those strategies, sort of make the most sense if you're going to kind of capture a lot of this space in the long term, at least.
Yeah. Someone's got to pay for these full-time riders. These riders are all full-time, which is great.
Right.
But that needs to be captured in the gross margins of these orders.
Yeah. Okay. So same question as I asked you for grocery delivery. Who do you see coming out on top in this convenience space?
So who do I see coming out? And so who am
Out
I
of
gonna
all the
pick?
sort
Yeah.
of convenience companies, and I think what's makes it challenging is that like DoorDash is doing both groceries and
Right.
convenience, and so that's sort of why I'm curious. Do you see it
Yeah.
being someone more GoPuff or more offering multitude of services?
Yeah. I think GoPuff will be the number one vertically integrated. I think Gorillas is doing the best execution. There's a lot of former Uber people there.
Hmm.
I'm just bearish on the profitability of that model, and how
does Gorillas differ from GoPuff, the model?
well, they don't have the liquor. They're
Got
going
it.
after tier one markets that are cutthroat. They're executing very well and delivering an amazing customer experience, which feels kind of like the way Uber felt in the beginning when compared to a taxi. The problem is that I just don't know if those basket sizes can really get to the point where they're disrupting a grocery stock up or a grocery run to really get those unit economics there. So I'm very bullish on GoPuff. I think DashMart, because it owns this fire hose of customers, this insane amount of demand, that I do think they will succeed, given where I think I was actually quick to write them off as far as the number of micro fulfillment centers they have, but they're 10 times higher than some of these guys' best stores. They're 10 times higher than Gorilla's best store. So if each of your stores are 10 times better than Gorilla's best store, you don't need 10 times the number, the number of stores. It's just like
you need a tenth of the stores just to be equal, right?
Yeah. So I think they're gonna, over the long term, allocate more investment towards that and grow that out, and even start putting robotic salad makers in there. Something I also wrote about. But yeah, I'll bet on those guys. GoPuff, DashMart duking it out.
Very cool. Well, definitely this space is exciting, and I know there's going to be a lot of innovations. You'll be right at the forefront covering it. So let us know if we want to learn more about your work, subscribe to Trends. Where can we go? Also tell us, Tease, what are you working on next? What are you excited about right now? What are you thinking about? What's the next trend that you're watching right now?
Thank you. Yeah, if you want to get started on HNGRY, you can sign up for the free newsletter at hngry.tv. It's hungry with no U, HNGRY.tv. There's also a paid service called Trends, which gives you kind of an insider look into these companies. The things I'm excited about right now, I'm thinking about is how do we enable all of these other retailers in convenience, whether it's a gas convenience store or whether it's a local bodega? How do we empower them with the tools, not to fight back? It's not a war. I mean, if you want to say it's a war, it is a war. But how do we get them in the mix here? Because that we can leverage that existing infrastructure. We can leverage those assets. That inventory is there. I think the problem is that no one's mapped it. No one's been able to really take their POS data and put it into the cloud and do all these virtual storefronts. So I'm looking for something, something like that. Interested in that, and really interested to see how brands leverage quick commerce to drive trial back to their website and get people to subscribe to their D2C food startup. And I'm interested to see how I think brands will be really big beneficiaries of GoPuffs and Gorillas of the world, maybe even more so than these services themselves. I think if they can leverage them in a smart way, and some of them are getting into advertising now, if they can figure out how to drive trial and how to be early to those marketplaces and figure out how to play there, and even like demo, try new products and tweak R&D new products. Be very cool.
Yeah, no, I think that last point is especially, there's some cool opportunities around, like you said, the example, you want to try one of these new hip beverages like a House or an Olipop or something like that, right? And you don't want to go buy 24 of a $2.50 soda, and then you get $50 worth of soda and you don't really like it. But I think there's opportunities like that. And even I've seen some pretty cool social media giveaways, kind of in tandem with getting them kind of quick convenience items delivered. I signed up for one. It didn't really work that well because I didn't get the item delivered, but you could see the potential there. And I have a friend at GoPuff that works on similar stuff there, so I know that they've got some cool stuff in the pipeline. I'm excited to see what you cover, what you come out with next, and appreciate you coming on the podcast as always, Matt. We'll leave a link to hungry.tv, a link to follow you on Twitter, where I know you're pretty active, and anywhere else that we can find you. So really appreciate it, Matt.
Amazing. It's always fun. Thanks so much for having me.
All right.